The Galactic Council chamber was silent as Ambassador Linda Morrison walked toward the central platform. Her footsteps echoed against the polished floor, and 47 alien species watched her with eyes that held no warmth. Some looked bored. Others seemed annoyed that they had to be here at all. A few whispered to each other in languages she could not understand, though she suspected she knew what they were saying. Humans again. Always asking for something. Linda had served as Earth's voice in this chamber for 15 years. She had stood on this same platform and pledged human ships to defend worlds she had never visited. She had promised human soldiers to fight wars that were not their own. She had smiled and nodded, and assured every species present that humanity would always be there when they needed help. Today, she was not smiling. Captain Nathan Cole watched from the observation gallery above. He wore his dress uniform, so one covered with medals and ribbons that represented 30 years of service to species who could not pronounce his name. He had fought in 12 major campaigns. He had lost friends at Valoran Prime and Keth Station in the dark spaces between stars where no light ever reached. He had buried men and women who died believing that their sacrifice meant something. Now he stood in this gallery and watched his ambassador beg for scraps. Linda reached the platform and activated the translation matrix. Her words would be converted into 47 languages simultaneously. Spreading across the chamber like ripples in still water, "The Terran Collective requests emergency aid," she began. Her voice was steady, professional, calm. Only Nathan could see how tightly her hands were clasped behind her back. "A biological agent we call the Blight has reached our agricultural worlds. Our crops are dying. Our food reserves are depleted. 14 billion humans face starvation within the standard year." She paused and looked around the chamber. No one spoke. No one moved. "We are asking our allies for assistance," she continued. "Grain shipments, agricultural technology, medical supplies to treat the infected regions. We are not asking for charity. We are prepared to negotiate fair terms and repayment schedules. We simply need help." The silence stretched on for several long moments. Nathan watched the alien faces, searching for any sign of sympathy or concern. He found none. High Counselor Veth of the Marani hegemony was the first to speak. He was an insectoid creature with gleaming black eyes and mandibles that clicked together when he talked. The Marani had been humanity's closest allies for 2 centuries. Human soldiers had died by the thousands defending Marani colonies from the Keth swarm. Human engineers had rebuilt Marani cities after the devastation. Human doctors had cured the Red Plague that nearly wiped out their species. "The humans have resources," Veth said dismissively. "Surely they can solve their own problems. This council should not be troubled with internal Terran matters." Linda's expression did not change, but Nathan saw something flicker in her eyes. Something painful. "We have given our resources," she replied quietly. "For 300 years, we have given everything we had. Our ships patrol your borders. Our soldiers guard your worlds. Our scientists share their discoveries freely. We gave until we had nothing left to give." She stepped forward, and her voice grew stronger. "When the Valoran Dominion threatened to consume the smaller species who stood against them, humans. When the Keth swarm emerged from dark space, who held the line for 18 months while your people evacuated. Humans. When the ancient machinery of silence awakened on Targus' prime, who found the words to put it back to sleep. Humans." She spread her hands. "We have bled for this galaxy. We have died for this galaxy. And now, for the first time in 3 centuries, we are asking for something in return." The counselor from the Keth Collective made a sound that the translation matrix rendered as laughter. He was a tall creature, with gray skin and too many limbs, and he had never liked humans. His species had nearly been destroyed by the swarm, saved only by human intervention. But gratitude was not in his nature. "The humans were compensated," he said. "Trade agreements, mining rights, cultural exchanges. They received fair payment for their services." "Trinkets," Linda said. The word came out harder than she intended. "You gave us trinkets while we gave you survival. You gave us beads and mirrors while we gave you our sons and daughters." The chamber erupted in murmurs. Several species seemed offended by her tone. Others simply looked confused, as if they could not understand why she was being so emotional about a simple business transaction. High Counselor Veth raised one appendage for silence. "We will put the matter to a vote," he announced. "All those in favor of providing emergency aid to the Terran Collective, indicate now." Nathan held his breath. The voting lights flickered across the chamber. Green for yes. Red for no. Yellow for abstain. Red. 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 Yellow. Red. 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 40-3 red lights. For yellow. Not a single green. The vote was unanimous. The galaxy had decided that humanity was not worth saving. Linda stood very still on the platform. Nathan watched her face and saw something change. Something that had been holding her together for years finally broke. But instead of falling apart, she seemed to grow stronger, colder, more certain. "Very well," she said. Her voice was calm now, almost peaceful. "Humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council. Effective immediately." The murmurs stopped. Every eye in the chamber turned toward her. "All human military personnel will return to Terran space within 30 standard days. All human technology shared under Allied agreements will be recalled. All human scientific cooperation will cease. All human presence in non-Terran territories will end within 90 standard days." She paused and looked around the chamber one last time. "We walked among the stars for you. We fought your wars and guarded your borders and gave you everything we had. And when we asked for bread, you gave us silence." She stepped down from the platform and began walking toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed in the stunned quiet. "Remember this day," she said without looking back. "Remember what you chose, because we will not come back. Whatever darkness rises in the void, whatever threats emerge from the spaces between stars, you will face them alone." She reached the door and stopped. "We were your shield," she said quietly. "We were your sword. We were your protectors and your guardians and your friends. And you threw us away because you could not be bothered to care." The door opened. "Goodbye." She walked out. Nathan Cole remained in the observation gallery for several minutes, watching the chamber below. The alien representatives were already returning to their other business, already forgetting the strange emotional humans who had just removed themselves from galactic affairs. A few seemed mildly concerned. Most simply looked relieved that the unpleasant scene was over. They had no idea what they had done. Nathan turned and followed his ambassador out of the chamber. Behind him, the Galactic Council continued its meeting, discussing trade routes and territorial disputes and all the small matters that seemed so important. They did not notice the silence that was already beginning to grow in the dark spaces between their worlds. They did not feel the cold wind that was starting to blow from the void, but they would. Soon enough, they would. 6 months passed after humanity walked away from the stars. At first, nothing seemed different. The trade routes remained open. The stations kept functioning. The diplomats continued their endless negotiations over borders and resources and all the
small things that mattered so much to them.
A few species even celebrated the departure of the humans. Calling it a new era of independence and self-reliance, they stopped celebrating when the the Verati pirates returned. The Verati had been a nuisance for centuries, raiding shipping lanes and attacking undefended colonies. They were cruel and clever and utterly without mercy. But human patrol fleets had kept them contained, pushing them back into the lawless regions where they could do little harm. Human captains knew their tactics. Human weapons outmatched their ships. Human determination had broken their spirit again and again. Now, the humans were gone. The first attack came without warning. A Marani cargo convoy vanished near the Thesan Nebula. 40 ships carrying food and medicine to the outer colonies simply disappeared. Search parties found only wreckage and frozen bodies drifting in the void. High Counselor Veth received the news in his private chambers. He read the report twice, then ordered his personal fleet to hunt down the pirates and destroy them. The Marani were a proud species. They had conquered star systems. They had built an empire. Surely they could handle a few primitive raiders. The Marani fleet found the Virati 3 days later. 200 warships against 50 pirate vessels. The outcome should have been obvious. The battle lasted 3 hours. When it was over, the Marani fleet was scattered debris. The Virati had studied human tactics for generations. They knew how to fight. They knew how to win. And now there were no humans to stop them. Veth stared at the casualty reports and felt something cold settle in his chest. Fear. He had not felt fear in a very long time, on the far edge of known space. The Keth Collective detected movement in the darkness between galaxies. Their sensor arrays, built and maintained by human engineers, picked up energy signatures that should not exist. Something was coming. Something old. Something hungry. The Keth requested technical assistance from the Council. They needed their sensors upgraded. They needed their defensive systems repaired. They needed someone who understood the complex human technology that kept them safe. No, one responded. The truth was simple and terrible. No one knew how the human technology worked. No one had ever bothered to learn. For 3 centuries, humanity had built and maintained and upgraded the systems that protected the galaxy. And everyone else had simply accepted it as their due. Like children who never learned to cook because their parents always fed them. Now the parents were gone. And the children were starving. Ambassador Yeth of the Marani hegemony was given a mission. Travel to Earth. Find the human leaders. Negotiate their return. Offer whatever concessions were necessary. His ship landed in a quiet field on the North American continent. The grass was green, and the sky was blue, and birds sang in the trees nearby. It looked peaceful. It looked safe. It looked like a world that had forgotten about war. Yeth walked toward the nearest dwelling. A small house with white walls and a wooden porch. An old woman sat in a chair outside, watching the sunset paint the clouds in shades of orange and red. She looked up as he approached, but did not seem surprised. "I am looking for your leaders," Yeth said. His translation device made his words clear and precise. "We wish to discuss terms for renewed cooperation." The old woman studied him for a long moment. Her eyes were gray and tired and held memories he could not begin to understand. "Leaders," she repeated. "You want to talk to our leaders?" "Yes. The situation in the galaxy has become complicated. We believe that certain misunderstandings occurred during the council session. We are prepared to offer significant concessions in exchange for limited military support." The woman's name was Martha Powell. She was 73 years old. She had lived in this house for 40 years, raised 2 children and 5 grandchildren, and buried her husband under the oak tree in the backyard. She had lived a simple life, as far from the wars and politics of distant stars, but the wars had touched her anyway. She stood up slowly, her joints aching with age. She looked at the alien ambassador with an expression he could not read. "My grandson died at Targus Prime," she said. "His name was Danny. He was 22 years old." Yeth shifted uncomfortably. "I am sorry for your loss. Many brave soldiers fell in that campaign." "He wasn't a soldier," Martha said. "He was a medic. He joined the fleet because he wanted to help people. He wanted to save lives. He used to say that it didn't matter what species someone was. That pain was pain, and fear was fear, and everyone deserved kindness." She walked past the ambassador and opened her front door. He died protecting people he had never met. People who lived on worlds he couldn't pronounce. People who never learned his name and never thanked him and never cared that he existed. "The Council recognizes the sacrifices made by human personnel," Yeth said carefully. "We are prepared to establish memorial funds and honorary designations to commemorate their service." Martha stopped in the doorway. She did not turn around. "Memorial funds," she said quietly. "Honorary designations. Yes, we wish to honor the fallen." Martha laughed. It was not a happy sound. Danny liked to build model ships when he was a boy. Little plastic things that he would paint by hand and hang from his ceiling. He had dozens of them. He used to tell me the name and history of every single one. She gripped the doorframe tightly. he always burned the toast. Every single time. His mother used to tease him about it. She said he could navigate through asteroid fields but couldn't manage a simple breakfast. Her voice cracked. He laughed at his own jokes even when they weren't funny. He cried at sad movies and pretended he wasn't crying. He called me every week, no matter where he was stationed, just to tell me he loved me. She turned and looked at Yeth with eyes full of grief and anger and something that might have been pity. He was my grandson. He was a person. He had a life and dreams and people who loved him. And he's gone now, buried in the cold dark between stars. And you don't get to come here and talk about concessions and memorial funds like that makes it better. The door began to close. Go home, Ambassador. Tell your council that we heard their answer 6 months ago. Tell them we understood it perfectly. Tell them that some doors once closed can never be opened again. The door shut. Yeth stood on the porch for a long time. The sunset faded, and the stars came out, and still he did not move. He thought about the old woman and her grandson. He thought about model ships and burnt toast and weekly. Calls from distant stations, he thought about. All the humans who had died for. His people and all the times he had never bothered to learn their names. Finally, he returned to his ship and flew back to Station Apex. He told the council that the humans would not negotiate. He recommended patience and alternative strategies. He said all the diplomatic things that diplomats were supposed to say. But late at night, when he was alone in his quarters, he thought about Danny Powell. He thought about the old woman's tears, and he wondered if the galaxy had made a terrible mistake. 2 years after humanity walked away, the galaxy began to burn. The Valoran Dominion had been waiting for this moment. They were a warrior species, bred for conquest and trained for war. For 3 centuries, human fleets had held them in check, defeating their armadas and forcing them to respect borders they despised. The Valoran had learned to hate humans with a passion that bordered on madness. Now the humans were gone, and nothing stood in their way. The invasion began on the outer rim. Small colonies fell first, their defenses crumbling against the Valoran assault. Refugee ships fled toward the core systems, carrying survivors who had lost everything. They begged for help. They pleaded for protection. They screamed into the void and received only silence in return. The Galactic Council held emergency sessions. They debated strategies and allocated resources and formed committees to study the problem. They did everything except actually fight. 17 star systems fell in 4 months. Billions of beings were killed or enslaved. The Valoran fleet grew stronger with each conquest, absorbing captured ships and conscripted soldiers into their ranks. On Targus Prime, the machinery of silence stirred in its ancient tomb. Human diplomats had spoken the words that put it to sleep decades ago. Words passed down through generations of careful study and desperate negotiation. But those diplomats were gone now. Recalled to Earth along with everyone else, the new negotiators sent by the Council did not know the words. The machinery-woke hungry commander, Patricia Reeves, knew nothing about any of this. She had left the Terran Expeditionary Force 3 years ago, honorably discharged after 25 years of service. She had fought in more battles than she could count. She had watched friends die in the darkness between stars. She had given everything she had to a galaxy that never appreciated her. Sacrifice. Now she grew tomatoes on Mars. Her farm was small, just a few acres of red soil covered by environmental domes. She had built it herself, using skills learned during her years of service. Every morning she woke before dawn and worked until sunset, coaxing green life from the barren ground. It was hard work. It was honest work. It was work that did not require her to kill anyone. She was checking the irrigation systems when she heard the explosion. The Marani shuttle crashed in her eastern field, tearing through 2 rows of tomato plants and scattering debris across the carefully tended soil. Patricia ran toward the wreckage without thinking, her old instincts taking over. Smoke poured from the ruined hull. Flames licked at the fractured metal. She found the pilot trapped in his seat, bleeding from a dozen wounds. He was young, for a Marani, with the soft shell of someone who had never seen combat. His eyes were wide with terror and pain. "Help me," he gasped. "Please help me. Patricia stared at him. She thought about all the reasons she should walk away. This was not her problem. This was not her war. The galaxy had made its choice. She had made hers. But then she looked at the young alien's face and saw something familiar. Fear, pain, the desperate hope that someone, anyone, would show him kindness in his darkest moment. She had worn that same expression once. A long time ago, she was wounded behind enemy lines, and a Morani medic had saved her life. Patricia pulled the pilot from the wreckage and carried him to her house. His name was Kethvoron. He had been a junior officer on High Counselor Via's personal staff, responsible for communications and data analysis. He had never held a weapon. He had never seen a battle. He had spent his entire career in comfortable offices, far from the violence that shaped the galaxy, until the Valoran came. Patricia spent 3 weeks nursing him back to health. She treated his wounds with supplies meant for agricultural accidents. She fed him nutrient paste modified for his biology. She sat beside his bed during the long nights, when fever gripped him and he cried out in languages she did not understand. Slowly, he began to recover. Slowly, he began to talk. "The council has fallen," he told her one evening, his voice still weak from his ordeal. "Station Apex was destroyed. The High Counselor is dead. The Valoran control everything from the rim to the core." Patricia absorbed this information without expression. She had expected something like this. She had known, deep in her heart, that the galaxy could not survive without humanity's protection. "How did you escape?" she asked. "I stole a shuttle from the evacuation fleet. I did not know where to go. I just flew. When my fuel ran low, I set course for the nearest habitable world." He looked at her with eyes full of shame. "I did not know it was human territory. I did not know anyone would help me." Patricia was quiet for a long moment. "Why should I help you?" she finally asked. "Your people voted to let my people starve. Your council threw us away like broken tools. You watched us die for 300 years and never once said thank you." Kethvoron lowered his gaze. "I know," he whispered. "I know what we did. I know what we are." He looked up at her, and tears glistened in his alien eyes. "I was there, you know. At the council session. I watched Ambassador Morrison plead for help. I watched my leaders vote against her. I said nothing. I did nothing. I told myself it was not my place to interfere." His voice broke. "I was a coward. We were all cowards. We took and took and took and never gave anything back. We let your people bleed for us and told ourselves that we were the civilized ones, that we were superior, that you owed us your service, because that was simply the natural order of things." Covered his face with his appendages. "Now my world is burning, and my people are dying, and there is no one left to save." Patricia watched him weep. She thought about all the friends she had lost. She thought about the medals she had thrown in a drawer and never looked at again. She thought about the nightmares that still woke her some nights. Memories of fire and blood and screaming. She thought about the Morani medic who had saved her life. All those years ago, when he could have simply walked away. "We tried to teach you," she said quietly. "We tried to show you how to stand against the darkness. We gave you our tactics and our weapons and our strategies. Why couldn't you fight back?" Kethvoron looked at her with something like despair. "We tried," he said. "We studied your methods. We copied your formations. We built ships based on your designs. But it was never enough. We could not do what you did. We could not find the strength." "Wasn't strength," Patricia said. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the red Martian landscape. "It was love. We fought because we loved the people behind us. We died because we loved the future we were building. You cannot learn that from a manual. You cannot copy it from a database. You have to feel it." She turned back to face him. "You understand now? Do you finally understand what you threw away?" Kethvoron nodded slowly. "Yes," he whispered. "I understand." Patricia looked at him for a long time. Then she sighed and sat down beside his bed. "Good," she said. "That's a start." 5 years after humanity walked away, the Valoran Dominion reached the edge of Terran space. Admiral Gregory Santos stood on the bridge of the Terran defense vessel Aurora and watched the enemy fleet approach. His tactical displays showed thousands of warships emerging from hyperspace, each one bristling with weapons and hungry for conquest. It was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. Behind him lay Earth. Behind him lay Mars and Venus and the orbital stations that circled the sun. Behind him lay 30 billion humans who had spent 5 years rebuilding their civilization, healing their wounds and preparing for this moment. Gregory was 62 years old. He had gray hair and tired eyes and scars on his hands from battles fought long ago. He had served in the fleet for 40 years, rising through the ranks on merit and determination. He had watched humanity give everything to a galaxy that never cared. Now that galaxy was coming to take what little they had left. "Sir," his tactical officer said. Her name was Lieutenant Karen Webb, and she was young enough to be his daughter. "The Valoran fleet has entered weapon range. They are hailing us." Gregory nodded slowly. "Put them on screen." The main display flickered, and the face of the Valoran commander appeared. He was massive, even by Valoran standards, with armored plates covering his body and eyes that burned with contempt. His name was Warlord Keth Moran, and he had personally overseen the conquest of 30 star systems. "Humans," the warlord said. His voice dripped with disdain. "Your time of hiding is over? The galaxy belongs to the Valoran now. Every species has knelt before us. Every world has fallen to our might. You are the last." Gregory said nothing. He simply watched and waited. "Surrender," the warlord continued. "Open your borders and accept our rule. Some of you will be permitted to serve in our labor camps. Some will be allowed to breed, to provide future generations of workers. Resist, and you will be exterminated. Every man, every woman, every child, your cities will burn. Your history will be erased. It will be as if you never existed." The bridge was silent. Every officer held their breath, waiting for their admiral's response. Gregory leaned forward in his command chair. "I remember you," he said quietly. "Battle of Keth Prime. 17 years ago. You commanded a carrier group on the Valoran left flank." The warlord's expression flickered with surprise. "We destroyed your fleet in 4 hours," Gregory continued. "I remember every ship. I remember every tactic you used. I remember every mistake you made." He paused. "You tried to flank us through the asteroid field. We anticipated the maneuver and cut you off. You lost 6 carriers and 18 cruisers before you retreated." Warlord Keth Moran's eyes narrowed. "That was a long time ago, human. We have learned much since then. We have conquered species that were ancient when your kind still lived in caves. You cannot frighten us with old memories." Gregory smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "You spent 3 centuries watching us fight your battles. You studied our tactics. You analyzed our strategies. You copied our formations and built ships based on our designs." He stood up from his chair. "You thought you understood us. You thought you knew what we were capable of." He walked toward the view screen until he was looking directly into the warlord's eyes. "You have no idea what we were holding back." The warlord laughed. "Brave words from a defeated species? Your fleet is small. Your resources are limited. You have been isolated for 5 years while we conquered the galaxy. What could you possibly have that we should fear?" Gregory turned to his tactical officer. Lieutenant Webb signaled the reserve fleet. Authorization code Omega-7. Karen's fingers flew across her console. For a moment nothing happened. Then the space behind the lunar shadow began to glow. Ships emerged from concealment. Not dozens. Not hundreds. 200 warships, each one larger and more powerful than anything the galaxy had ever seen. They were sleek and dark and moved with a precision that seemed almost supernatural. Their hulls were made of materials that did not exist in any galactic database. Their weapons charged with energies that defied conventional physics. For 3 centuries, humanity had shared its technology with the galaxy. They had given away their weapons and their ships and their knowledge, holding nothing back for themselves. That was a lie. Humanity had always kept their best secrets hidden. They had developed weapons too terrible to use except in the most desperate circumstances. They had built ships too powerful to reveal to allies who might someday become enemies. They had prepared for the day when they would stand alone against the darkness. That day had come. Warlord Kethmaron stared at the tactical display with something that looked like fear. Impossible, he whispered. This is impossible. You wanted to know what we were holding back? Gregory said. Now you know. He returned to his command chair. All ships, engage at will. The Battle of Seoul lasted 6 hours. The Valoran fought with everything they had. They were warriors born and bred, and they did not know how to surrender. They threw themselves at the human fleet in wave after wave, hoping to overwhelm them through sheer numbers. It did not matter. The human ships moved through the Valoran armada like wolves through sheep. Their weapons tore through shields and armor as if they were paper. Their tactics anticipated every Valoran maneuver before it was made. Their coordination was so perfect that it seemed like the entire fleet shared a single mind. When it was over, the Valoran armada was scattered debris drifting in the void. 3,000 warships reduced to wreckage and frozen bodies. The greatest military force in galactic history was destroyed in a single afternoon. Admiral Gregory Santos lost 11 ships. He sat in his command chair and looked at the tactical display for a long time. Then he opened a channel to the Valoran homeworld. This is Admiral Gregory Santos of the Terran Defense Force. Your invasion fleet has been destroyed. Your expansion ends here, today, in this moment. He paused and let his words sink in. We are not your peacekeepers anymore. We are not your guardians. We are not your protectors. We are simply your neighbors. We ask nothing from you. We expect nothing from you. We want nothing from you except to be left alone. His voice hardened. But if you launch another attack against Terran space, we will come for you. Not to defend, not to protect, to end. We will burn your worlds and scatter your fleets and erase your civilization from the stars. This is not a threat. This is not a warning. This is a simple statement of fact. He leaned forward. We were kind once. We were gentle. We gave everything we had to protect species who despised us. That version of humanity died 5 years ago when the galaxy chose to let our children starve. He stood up. What remains is something older, something harder. Something that remembers every insult and every betrayal and every friend we buried in the cold dark between stars. His final words echoed across the galaxy. Do not test us again. You will not survive the experience. The transmission ended in the silence that followed. Every species that had spent years suffering under Valoran occupation received the news. The humans had returned, not as saviors, not as allies, but as a force that could not be ignored, and they had made no promises to anyone except themselves. 10 years after humanity walked away, Representative Maria Vance traveled to the stars. Her shuttle descended through the atmosphere of New Thesan, a world that had been rebuilt from the ashes of Valoran occupation. The scars of war were still visible on the surface below. Burned cities, shattered landscapes, mass graves that stretched for miles across the barren ground, but there were also signs of hope. New buildings rising from the rubble, fields of crops growing in soil that had been poisoned by weapons fire, children playing in streets that had once run with blood. The galaxy was healing, slowly, painfully, but healing nonetheless. Maria was 45 years old. She had never served in the military. She had never traveled beyond the solar system until 3 years ago, when Earth's government asked her to serve as their representative to what remained of the galactic community. She was a teacher by training, a diplomat by necessity, and a human being by choice. The rebuilt Galactic Council chamber was smaller than the old one. It had been constructed on New Thesan because Station Apex no longer existed, destroyed during the Valoran advance, along with billions of innocent lives. The new chamber held representatives from only 23 species. The others had been absorbed or exterminated or simply vanished during the long years of darkness. Maria walked to the central platform. The faces around her were different from the ones that had rejected humanity a decade ago. These were younger faces, harder faces. Faces that had seen things no living being should ever have to see. They looked at her with expressions she recognized. Fear and hope mixed together in equal measure. The desperate wish that somehow, some way, the nightmare might finally be over. The new High Counselor rose to greet her. His name was Vethkaran, and he was the grandson of the High Counselor who had voted against humanity all those years ago. His grandfather had died when Station Apex fell, one of billions who paid the price for that terrible decision. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us," Vethkaran said. His voice was humble in a way his grandfather's had never been. "We are grateful that humanity has chosen to hear our words." Maria nodded politely, but did not smile. "You asked for this meeting," she said. "I am here to listen." Vethkaran glanced at the other representatives, then took a deep breath. "We wish to discuss the possibility of renewed cooperation between humanity and the galactic community. We understand that mistakes were made in the past. Terrible mistakes. Unforgivable mistakes. We do not ask you to forget what happened. We only ask for a chance to prove that we have learned from our failures." Maria was quiet for a long moment. She thought about Linda Morrison, who had stood on a platform much like this one and begged for help that never came. Linda had died 7 years ago, peacefully in her sleep, never having left Earth again after that final council session. Her last words had been about her garden and the flowers she hoped would bloom in spring. She thought about Nathan Cole, who had retired to a small house on Luna, where he spent his days watching Earth rise and set. He wrote letters sometimes, long, rambling letters about nothing in particular, and Maria always made sure to write back. He was lonely, she knew. All the old soldiers were lonely. They had given so much and received so little, and now they were fading away one by one like stars at dawn. She thought about Martha Powell, who still lived in the same house where she had turned away the Marani ambassador. Martha was 83 now and growing frail, but she still tended her garden and still talked about Danny as if he might walk through the door at any moment. She thought about Patricia Reeves, who had returned to active service during the Battle of Seoul and now commanded the defense station orbiting Mars. Patricia had taken in Kethron as a permanent guest, and the two of them had become unlikely friends. He helped her with the farm when she had time to visit it. She taught him how to make burnt toast. She thought about Gregory Santos, who had become something of a legend after his victory over the Valoran. He hated the attention. He hated being called a hero. He said that heroes were people who did extraordinary things. All he had done was his job. Maria thought about all of them. All the humans who had sacrificed and suffered and survived. Then she looked at the representatives gathered before her and saw the same desperate hope that had filled Linda Morrison's eyes 10 years ago. The difference was that now, for the first time, they seemed to mean it. "Cooperation," she said slowly. "That is an interesting word. It implies mutual benefit. It implies respect. It implies that both parties bring something valuable to the table." "Yes," Vethkaran said eagerly. "We understand that now. We truly do. We are prepared to offer full partnership, equal representation in all decisions, shared resources distributed fairly. Whatever you need, whatever you want, we will provide it." Maria held up her hand. 10 years ago, we asked you for bread. You gave us silence. So we walked away. We built our own future with our own hands. We protected our own people with our own strength. We learned to live without you." She stepped down from the platform and walked among the representatives, looking at each of them in turn. "We do not hate you. We do not want revenge. We do not dream of conquest or domination. We simply do not need you anymore. We are complete in ourselves, whole in our own way, happy with the lives we have. Built." She stopped in front of Vethkaran. And I think that frightens you more than anything else we could have done." High Counselor lowered his gaze as he admitted quietly, "It does, because we need you. The Keth remnants are regrouping in the outer darkness. The machinery of silence is spreading across Targus's prime and the surrounding systems. There are things moving in the void that we cannot name and cannot fight. We need your help. We need your strength. We need your wisdom." Maria looked at him for a long time. "I know," she said softly. "I know you need us. And 10 years ago, if you had asked, we would have given everything we had to help you. That was who we were. That was what we did. We gave and gave and gave until we had nothing left." She walked back toward the platform. "But you did not want our help then. You wanted our sacrifice. You wanted us to bleed for you without ever acknowledging what it cost. You wanted heroes, not partners. Tools, not friends." She turned to face the chamber. "We are not heroes anymore. We are just people. People who finally learned that we do not have to destroy ourselves to save others. People who finally understood that kindness without boundaries is not kindness at all, but self-destruction." Beth Karan stepped forward. "Then what do you want from us?" he asked, and his voice cracked with emotion. "What can we do? What can we offer? Please tell us, and we will do it. Anything, everything. Just tell us what you need." Maria smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. "Nothing," she said. "We want nothing from you. But if you want something from us, then you must earn it. Build trust through actions, not words. Show respect through deeds, not promises. Treat us as equals, not as useful instruments to be discarded when the work is done." She walked toward the exit. "It will take time. It will take effort. It will take patience and humility and the willingness to fail and try again. There are no shortcuts. There are no easy answers. There is only the slow, difficult work of becoming worthy of the friendship you once threw away." She paused at the door. "We will be watching. We will be waiting. Prove to us that you have changed. Prove to us that you understand what you lost. Prove to us that you are capable of being true partners, true allies, true friends." She looked back at the chamber one last time. "And maybe someday we can walk among the stars together again." The door closed behind her. In the chamber, 23 species sat in silence. They had come hoping for promises and guarantees and immediate solutions. Instead, they had received something far more valuable. They had received a chance. Whether they would take it remained to be seen. Whether they would learn from the past and build a better future was up to them. But for the first time in a decade, there was hope. Out in the darkness between stars, humanity watched and waited. They had walked away from a galaxy that did not deserve them. They had survived. They had grown stronger. And now, finally, the galaxy was beginning to understand what it had lost. The story was not over. It was only beginning. And this time, humanity would not walk alone.